How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Toma Todito Boxing Show. And we are 24 hours removed from having witnessed what was billed as the biggest event assembled in boxing history, the Day of Reckoning. And it lived up to the hype. It really did. It lived up to the hype. Every single one of the fights had something to offer. It had something for everybody. The entire event proved to be a huge success. Congratulations to the matchmakers, to all the promoters who came together and took part in building this huge event, and to Saudi Arabia, because listen, money talks, and they're throwing bundles of money at everybody's way just to be able to secure the biggest and the most wanted events, I guess. They kicked off RIYADH season with Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou, who was jumping over from MMA and being the UFC heavyweight king, making his debut in boxing. And of course, the Gypsy King. Well, this was somewhat of an exhibition / entertainment / putting your titles on the line. And to see how well Francis Ngannou did in that fight as RIYADH season kicked off, and to think that even though he lost on the scorecards, he came out the winner from a fan's perspective, to where we're clamoring to see him back in the squared circle rather than returning to MMA. It was a great event, and it took a while to soak everything in. And I'm still very, very excited and amped up for what 2024 has to bring, especially to these heavier divisions, because the way all these guys performed yesterday, and I told you guys on the preview episode, standings and the rankings were going to be completely rearranged and shaken up any which way you cut it, because of what was going to take place yesterday and what took place yesterday. So we start with the very beginning. Franck Sanchez, on the preview episode, I told you guys, to me, he's been the one that is just ready to become the next breakout star. But he needed to put on a type of performance such as what he's done in the last few fights, especially when he's taken part on the undercard of Canelo events, of Canelo's last few fights. Franck Sanchez, of course, trains with Canelo, spars with Canelo under the tutelage of Eddie Reynoso. And the way I had seen that fight was Junior Fa, the slower, more flat-footed, slower in delivery as far as hand speed, as far as combinations are concerned, and his attack, his offensive, a lot slower than what Franck Sanchez brings to the table. And on the preview episode, I'm mentioning to you guys how I notice, at least what I recognize, is that Franck Sanchez tends to fight, even though he's a big body and a heavyweight, he fights like a smaller fighter would, like a light heavyweight or a middleweight at that. He moves his feet really good. He has very good hand speed, delivers punches in fast succession, and he ended up doing just that. My prediction was that out of all the fighters in the entire card, his stock was going to rise the highest and just shoot through the roof, but he needed to perform and potentially put on a magnificent stoppage of Junior Fa, which his work was going to be cut out from. Just looking at the weigh-ins, Junior Fa came in at 279, while Franck Sanchez weighed 238. The better pedigreed boxer, Franck Sanchez, the more experienced, I guess, as far as dealing with bigger bodies and having taken more punishment, because Franck Sanchez is very good to where he's able to not get hit as much as your traditional heavyweight. Well, Junior Fa, in that sense, you would think that he'd be a lot more seasoned, and was more of the seasoned heavyweight coming into the ring. Frank Sanchez took the fight to him. Exactly what I was anticipating is exactly what he did. And it was a fun fight from beginning to end where Frank Sanchez was just moving really well. His footwork was sharp. His hands were crisp. And he delivered punches to the body and mixed up his attack fairly well. But eventually did enough to start wearing Junior Fa down in quick succession, in quick fashion. He dropped them several times until the final drop and stoppage came in round 7. Frank Sanchez retained his NABO title, remains undefeated, and is now knocking on the door of any of the big heavyweights. Not big in size, but big in name is what I'm referring to. He's right there. And I stand by it. I think the performance that he put on, I think there's a little recency bias that occurs when you have such jam-packed cards, such as Day of Reckoning, because you tend to remember the latter part of the card. Those are the most recent memories and clips and highlights that you keep in your head and tend to forget the earlier fights. But you have to go revisit these. And if you look at the fights again, go watch them again. If you start looking at just the highlight videos themselves, very impressive the way they cut these highlights. DAZN's always been really good at doing justice to the highlights and recapping the fights in that fashion, because they do a service to both fighters and really display the breakdowns in the fight and where the issues begin to show themselves. Very good work by DAZN in that sense, because you're able to capture the feel and the flow of the fight just by glancing at the highlights that they managed to put together. Traditional highlights are 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. DAZN tends to put these 7-9 minute long videos, 13 minute long videos. So they really give you a full feel of what the fight, at least you get a good feel by watching that, of how the fight was going and the flow of it. Frank Sanchez and Junior Fa kicked off the event in great fashion, in impressive fashion, and I can't wait to see who Frank Sanchez gets matched up with in the coming future. Hopefully, is one of these names that we saw take part of this card along with him. We move on to the other matchup, Makhmudov against Kabayel. I had seen the fight as, if you hold me responsible to the preview episode, I called that Makhmudov was gonna flatline Kabayel, just like he had done to 17 previous victims in his record, 18-0 with 17 knockouts. Kabayel was undefeated as well, but not as many knockouts to his favor. Makhmudov came in at 262. Kabayel came in at 241 and a quarter. And there was only one pathway to victory that I said, or that I commented on for Kabayel, and that was that he needed to get on his bike, implement his footwork, box and outpoint Makhmudov, and he would be able to cruise to a decision victory with hold the storm early on, stay on the path, land the decision win. Do your best to not get in a stand and bang situation, Makhmudov, because at that point, he would flatline you. So I called it for Makhmudov. And this was a surprise not just to me, but the shocker of the entire night, because Kabayel did exactly that. He boxed, his footwork was amazing, he delivered amazing, and everything started switching to his favor early on because of his counterpunching. He would move in, move out, Makhmudov would swing and miss and get caught with 1 or 2 punches. His combinations on behalf of Kabayel were second to none. Amazing work that he put together. And he did not cruise to a decision, but he drops Makhmudov several times until the final stoppage came, which happened in round 4. Kabayel stopped the monster, the boogeyman, one of the boogeyman in the heavyweight division. This giant that just seemed like a towering inferno that no one was going to be able to withstand his damage, his strong punches. Kabayel, including, exchanged fire with fire on numerous occasions when he happened to be close to the ropes. He stood there and took it and delivered, and was actually managed to move and feint in such a quick fashion that he would cause Makhmudov to miss, while countering and landing cleanly on Makhmudov, which eventually ended up getting him to stumble back. Delivered that body attack in near perfect fashion. It couldn't have been any better, in my opinion. What Kabayel put together yesterday, that body of work, impressive, magnificent. Any one of the words that could give praise to him and his team, because that game plan worked to perfection. The body attack was the key there. He took his legs from under him, and from there it was happy hunting for Kabayel until he managed to stop and get him out of there. The referee waved it off. In round 4, Kabayel remains undefeated, gives the first blemish to Makhmudov. Kabayel remains undefeated and moves on to bigger and better things. And it's going to be a nightmare for anybody, because now people know that they got their work cut out for themselves if whoever chooses to step across the ring from Kabayel. Great boxer, great delivery, great footwork. We'll see who they match him up against. Cruiserweight division, Jai Opetaia, Elizoro. This was going to be the rocky story for Elizoro. Should he be able to contend, withstand the fury of Opetaia, inflict damage, and pull off the stoppage of Opetaia, or even if it was by decision, Elizoro's career would have shot through the roof. But it was going to be a hard task at that, and it proved to be tougher than he anticipated and that all of us anticipated. Opetaia just put an end to him. It was a nasty knockout. A nasty knockout where Zoro's head is laying on that bottom rope, tilted to the side, and they immediately stopped and began to render aid. They including ended up pumping him with oxygen. It was a scary sight. Impressive knockout by Opetaia. Impressive and scary at that. You name it, throw whoever you want his way. Opetaia is the elite of cruiserweight, of the cruiserweight division at this moment. He's scary, he's fast, he's strong, good footwork, good ring awareness, and just takes the fight to you. He's going to be a headache for anybody who dare step in the ring with him. He's at that. He's knocking at his peak. He hasn't reached his peak yet, which is the scary thing. But he's there. Elizoro came in with a 17-0 record, but obviously it was a lighter resume and a lighter route than what Jai Opetaia had coming into the ring with the 23-0. He's now 24-0, unblemished, untouched, and nobody comes to mind right now that could stop him. There's some really good matchups out there for him. Nobody comes to mind that could give him headaches. Zurdo Ramirez, campaigning there now. It was somewhat of a catch weight that he recently had with Joe Smith, but they seem to be campaigning at that weight now. Man, sky's the limit for Opetaia. Super excited to see what 2024 holds for him and what he's gonna look like in 2024. Dimitri Bivol, man, we talked about it on the preview episode, how there were several fighters with long layoffs that would be potentially affected. And that was the intrigue behind those fighters and those fights, to see how the layoff would come into play if it did. The quote-unquote ring rust. Dimitri Bivol made easy work of Lyndon Arthur. You got to give it up to Arthur because he has a lot of heart, a lot of spirit. He did not want to check out. He was willing to withstand the fire, continue walking through, started having some minor success against Bivol. In the second half of the fight, but it was too few, too little as far as success from his behalf, and too far in between. The game plan, in my opinion, on the preview episode, I said Lyndon Arthur has to jump on him and jump on him quick and expose the long layoff. The 13-month layoff that Dimitri Bivol was coming into the ring with. Bivol, leading up to the fight, said, there should be no ring rust. I've been active. I've been in shape. I needed this rest. I needed this break. I needed the reset. I have re-engaged. I'm ready to go. And that he was. Rather than Arthur starting quick, as soon as the opening bell hit, Dimitri Bivol covered ground and took the fight to Lyndon Arthur, not even letting Arthur get settled. Bivol didn't even allow himself to get settled and start finding his rhythm and warm up. He just took the fight to him and started punching. And it didn't slow down from there. That was the rhythm. That was the pace. Bivol set it from the opening bell, and it was just a one-sided performance. He took his IBO title, Lyndon Arthur's IBO title, even though it isn't one of the four major sanctioning bodies. The IBO, like I mentioned on the preview episode, the IBO title has been around the waist of many notable fighters. Some of the more recent names, well, now you got Dimitri Bivol, Anthony Joshua, Alexander Usyk, Tyson Fury. In years past, we've seen Manny Pacquiao with the IBO, Triple G, Floyd Mayweather, Roy Jones, Hopkins. So it has some history and some weight to it. And holding that title, you knew that even though it is not the highly coveted or one of the four highly coveted titles, it holds some weight. And if you have that title, you've basically been eliminating all the up-and-comers, the prospects, and the gatekeepers to get yourself to that position. And you begin knocking on the door of the more recognizable champions. That's who Arthur was stepping into this. I did call it that, in my opinion, Lyndon Arthur stepping into this fight against Bivol it seemed to me like it was going to be a little too soon for his young career. He's been around since 2016, but the way that they've brought him up, there's been some gaps, there's been some delays. He's been active for the most part in the last... he's been active overall in his entire career. In 2017, if we look at 2017, he had 5 or 6 fights in 2017. I'm checking out his resume right now. He had 6 fights in 2017, 4 in 2018, 3 in 2019, 2 in 2020, 2 in 21, 2-22, and this was the third fight of this year for him. So he started really strong resume, a lot of work, and then started diminishing. Why? I don't know. He wasn't there yet. He hasn't reached that point to where he should start fighting once or twice a year. And that could very well be a huge factor, have played a huge factor for the way that he displayed his talents yesterday and where he's at in his career. In my opinion, I still consider him a young, up-and-coming fighter because he's just reaching that point of success. And a loss like this and a performance like this, he has a lot of heart and showed it, displayed it, full front. But when you get picked apart and just manhandled the way that Bivol took the fight to him, he stood his ground. It was very spirited, and you definitely applaud Arthur for just sticking it out. But he didn't have a chance. A puncher's chance, of course, if he would have landed a crazy haymaker, but he wasn't even trying to do that. He would hesitate. He would fake and feint and never fire. Meanwhile, Bivol would close the gap and land. Congratulations to Dimitri Bivol, because he did not let what could have been a disadvantage in referring to the layoff. He did not let that become a hindrance to him. Took the fight to Arthur, eliminated any type of ring rust, and he's right back where he left off. Impressive. From Canelo to Zurdo to Lyndon Arthur, and now he awaits in 2 or 3 weeks' time the result of the Better BF Callum Smith title fight, where Callum Smith is challenging Better BF for his 3 titles. And you bet that Bivol is going to be tuning into that fight and on the phone with Eddie Hearn, immediately hoping to land that unification bout, whether it be Better BF or if Callum Smith pulls off the upset. Filip, Hrgovic, and Mark Demori, we called that one. And I'm sure you guys saw it the same way. Demori, on paper, had a solid record, going into the fight with a 41-2-2 record, but it was against lesser opposition. It was stay busy fight after stay busy fight after stay busy fight. So he would look good, and on paper he looks like he's a lot better than he is. He would look good against opposition that will never reach championship heights or prospect heights or contender heights, with records such as a 6-23 or whatever it was that we were reading on the preview episode. All his last opponents, I mean, he was fighting people that were way below 500. Filip Hrgovic made quick work of him, remains undefeated, stopped him in the first round. He was hitting him so hard, Demori was holding his head, thinking it was the back of the head. Some of them did look questionable because Hrgovic was just throwing. And the ref stopped the fight. First round stoppage. There was about a minute left in the round to go. And he had already been dropped, I believe, 2 or 3 times. Demori was. Hrgovic took the fight to him. And of course, if you remember on the preview episode, we revisited Hrgovic. He is a monster to be considered as one of the favorite heavyweights to come out of the bunch and make a run for a legacy, make a run at these titles, and have a really effective run at that, maybe an effective championship run, because he's that type of fighter. He's good, he's knowledgeable, he has a lot of power, and the way that he delivers, every punch that he throws is with bad intentions. immediately after the main event concluded, and we're going to get to that, there's already talks about him potentially being the next opponent for Anthony Joshua. Daniel Dubois, Jarrell Miller, I believe, stole the show as far as a back and forth fight is concerned. That to me was the best fight of the night, the most competitive between the two, even though it was a one-sided onslaught of Daniel Dubois just constantly throwing and landing on Jarrell Miller, to Jarrell Miller's hooks and overhand punches that he would land. This was a 330-pound man in Jarrell Miller and Big Baby Miller. 333 pounds. That was his weigh-in, let alone what he might have rehydrated at. To 239 in Daniel Dubois. He was 100 pounds, give or take, heavier than Daniel Dubois, and Dubois threw everything at him. As the expression says, he threw everything but the kitchen sink. He hit him and hit him and hit him, and uppercuts and hooks and you name it, and kept walking him back and walking him back. And Jarrell Miller just continued to walk forward, walk through Daniel's punches. He looked like a real life juggernaut. He just kept walking through the fire, walking forward, landing punches every so often, getting hit to the body and just dealing with it. And Daniel Dubois started looking like he was going to wear out. His stamina was going to leave him. And at times, I did get the inkling, the feeling that Jarrell Miller had taken everything that Daniel Dubois could throw at him, and that he was going to start moving forward and just stop him. He had some success, and some scary success at that. But in the end, Dubois, too much, too quick, too everything for Jarrell Miller, and pulls off a stoppage of Big Baby with approximately 29 seconds or so left in the 12th round. Dubois pulls off, the 10th round, because it was a 10-round fight. He pulled off the incredible down the stretch with seconds left on the clock. He bounces back from that controversial fight and knockout loss to Usyk, having fought for 3 of the 4 belts. And now he bounces back. He returns to the win column and should be knocking on the door of any of the big names. He is one of the big names now. And they'll be knocking on his door as well. Deontay Wilder, Joseph Parker. We talked about the layoffs. We just went into it with Dimitri Bivol. Here's a fighter who had not fought in Deontay Wilder since his first round knockout, or however early that knockout was with Robert Helenius last year. And then inactive. That was in October of last year. Inactive since then, 14 months. The inactivity was evident. Ring rust was not a factor with Dimitri Bivol. We don't know if it's just not there anymore. We were waiting. I was clamoring for that one knockout punch to come, and he landed some really good punches on Joseph Parker. Hard punches that would stumble Parker back. But they were just a handful. I think I even got on X. Well, I did get on X. And one of the comments that I ended up shooting on there during that fight was, I think it was already maybe the 6th, 7th round. And the thought that came to my head as I'm typing that message or the tweet was that Deontay Wilder seemed like he was en route to break Edwin de los Santos' record of inactivity. Remember, Edwin de los Santos in that Shakur fight earlier this year broke a record for having thrown the least amount of punches in a professional fight, in a professionally sanctioned fight. And I think he threw 44 punches or 40 punches, something like that, in the entirety of the fight. That's how little Deontay Wilder was throwing. He was just looking for the knockout, and it was evident. And all he would throw was the right, over and over and over whenever he would decide to throw. But there was no setup, there was no feigning. I really think he was gassed. Even though he was moving and moving and moving, but he was gassed. He didn't have any pop. There was no reaction there. That reaction was gone. He usually sets up that punch by throwing a double left jab, closing in the gap, and throwing that bazooka of a right hand that he has. There was none of that. He did it maybe a handful of times. 3 that come to mind. He had nothing. At the end of the fight, the interesting part was that he felt, in the post-fight interview, he felt that he had done enough, but was saddened that the decision didn't go his way, which was a little bit delusional in my part, and very disappointing. Not just because of him, because he's in the ring, he's fighting, he's the one that's in the mix. But for the corner to not be telling him and not be instilling a little bit of urgency so he could step up the pace, that was the disturbing part for me. He could feel that the fight went one way, that it went one way. But to not have that acknowledgement from his corner to be telling him, like, hey, you're losing this fight. Like, step it up. Do something. Every time that they put the camera on the corner, Malik Scott was very calm, telling him, hey, you want to block like this? You want to do this? You want to lift your arm like this or lower your... There was no sense of urgency, no fire. No realism there to where they should have told him, like, you better switch this up, start throwing your left hand, generate that power punch, create that knockout punch by way of your left jab, like you've done in the past. You've lost 8 rounds. It was a one-sided fight. And like I said on the preview episode, Joseph Parker, in my opinion, he's just a good blue-collar style fighter where he's like a Tim Duncan of boxing, in my opinion. Nothing flashy, nothing extraordinary, nothing that may make it on a nightly basis on the ESPN highlights. But you just get consistency. You get effort, awareness, and a near flawless implementation of his game plan. His communication with Andy Lee on the corner was superb. He was aware of what was going on. He was aware of what he needed to watch out for. He was aware that the body, when every time that he was hitting Deontay to the body, he was hurting him. He nearly stopped him. He nearly knocked him out on a couple of occasions. Parker is just a solid, impressive worker that he's just going to give you the same look every time, and you know you're in for a long night when you're in there trying to exchange and box and outwork a Joseph Parker. Will he get the rematch against Anthony Joshua? Well, we'll have to see. But he's doing all the right things. Deontay Wilder took another loss. All the blemishes on his record to date, the draw and the 2 losses, the 2 defeats were at the hand of Tyson Fury and against Tyson Fury. And now he has a loss to Joseph Parker. The inactivity is killing him. He also mentioned at the end of the interview, at the post-fight interview, Deontay does, he says that he doesn't know if he has it anymore. He mentioned that he has taken retreats to ayahuasca, where he has partaken in the ayahuasca ceremonies for cleansing his body, his mind. And he's questioning whether the fire is still there or not. He says he's just happy to be a part of the event. It was a huge payday for him, obviously, but he doesn't feel like the fire is there anymore, and he's going to go back and take some time off, deservingly so, and reassess whether he's going to continue fighting or not. One thing's for sure, he has done everything he needed to do to take care of his family. And remember, his journey, the origins of his journey as a UPS driver, was that he got into boxing to take care of his daughter because she had medical complications and he was financially unstable with tons of medical debt. So he got into fighting, and now he's set for the rest of his days. If he's smart with his money, which it seems like he is, he makes smart financial decisions, he'll be set for the rest of his days. And he will secure, as of now, he more than likely has secured an excellent life for his children and for many generations to come. He's done that. That's what I like about Deontay Wilder's story. And there's many stories like that across boxing. So it sucks because in my opinion, I felt that his power was going to bail him out. I saw him winning. I did not want to pick against Deontay Wilder. The Dubois-Miller fight was the 50-50 fight for me out of the entire card. Deontay Wilder, I thought his power was going to bail him out. He was going to get outboxed by Parker. If you revisit the preview episode, he was going to get outboxed by Parker, in my opinion. But that power, you just never bet against. And he tried to land that thing and landed it on several occasions, which caused damage to Parker. But it was too little. Not enough to have stopped Parker. And Parker fought an excellent fight. And very deserving of the victory. We move on to the main event. And I had called out that Otto Wallin was going to outbox and beat AJ because of what I've noticed about Otto Wallin's career, in that he is one of those few fighters that does not abandon what has brought him so much success to date. And that is his boxing, his style of boxing, his in and out, his ability to land punches in quick succession when in close against bigger fighters, his ability to counter well, his ability to recognize where he's at in the ring and how to get in and out of tough situations. I felt that he was going to be too much for Anthony Joshua, who had failed to make the necessary adjustments between fights with Usyk. And got back in the winning ways, which was this is the admirable part about AJ, that he got back to fighting. No long layoffs, let's get back in there. Let's get working. Let's keep working. And he kept working and came away with 2 victories. And now this one, his third and a stoppage win at that. AJ looked amazing. The fire is back. He had that look in his eye that he was not going to be bested, and he was landing with bad intentions and at will. He was landing fast. His combinations were landing superbly. He outboxed the boxer. He outboxed Otto Wallin. Wallin had nothing for him. He landed a few punches here and there, especially on the counter end, but then he would get popped again. Eventually got busted up and did not answer the bell. Joshua stops him in 5. He looked good. He looked in shape. He looked cut up. He looked sharp. He looked crisp. Amazing footwork. He was in there just moving and bobbing and weaving and feigning and going in, going out, and circling around Wallin's right hand, landing at will down center. From measuring jab to the follow-up right, he was landing at will, and there was nothing that was going to stop Joshua. Complete night and day performance from the two big names co-headlining the event. Anthony Joshua with a masterful performance and an amazing boxing performance that he put on against Otto Wallin. He outboxed a true boxer. Versus that performance of Deontay Wilder, which we just spoke about, where he was a no-show, a fraction of himself. This was the worst Deontay Wilder that we've seen in his entire career. And if he does hang it up, then rightfully so. Even from the rematch against Tyson Fury, or whenever there was some type of drama that affected Deontay Wilder throughout his career, and he did not perform to par, none of those compare to what we saw yesterday. He was still in there, but his footwork was off, or he would still be in the fight, but this would affect him, or this would affect him, or he wasn't throwing his hands enough, or he wasn't... There was nothing from Deontay. From AJ, perfection. So that fight is off the table for the time being. If Deontay decides to continue his career and get on those winning ways, and Joshua down the line takes another loss somewhere, well, there'll be a last one final attempt to make that fight happen as both of them reach the latter stages of their respective careers. But at the moment, AJ continues to shoot back up and back in title contention versus where Deontay will go. How far low will he go? I don't know. Same thing for Gerald Miller, who with this impressive performance and stoppage of Daniel Dubois, he would be on that fight, getting into that fight against AJ, the fight that never happened because of his own doing, having failed those drug tests in 2019. Andy Ruiz taking part of the commentary, wanting to get in there with the big name. Why was he not part of this card? Well, we already talked about how he outpriced himself in the fight against Deontay Wilder, even though he denies it. Why did the fight not happen? Obviously he did, because Deontay somehow got leverage as far as a payday is concerned and got swayed into this big event, and he took part in it. So he was willing to fight. And Andy Ruiz, I don't see a comeback fight for him. I don't see anything that's scheduled for him as of this recording. And he was just there part of the commentary talking. We just saw what a long layoff does to a heavyweight fighter. The reaction's gone, the reactionary gap, the reaction time, the fire. We just talked about it. How are we going to see Andy Ruiz? We saw what having a leisurely life does to a fighter, because Andy Ruiz showed us that between Anthony Joshua fights, between the first showing that he did in an impressive knockout of Anthony Joshua to the second fight in the rematch where he was a shell of himself. And here we go, more evidence. Because of that 14-month layoff, hands down it had something to do with Deontay Wilder and with the way that he performed yesterday. Hands down. You can't tell me otherwise. There was no evidence that he was injured. There was no No inkling of that. There was no reports, no rumors. He was good. He was ready to go. But it's the mental. He might not be in it anymore, like he said. And that's okay too. Because he just cashed out another big payday and has secured his family's life even more so. So then the matchmaking immediately begins after Anthony Joshua closes out the night in impressive fashion. And Eddie Hearn in the post-fight press conference stated that they may be visiting the idea of Filip Hrgovic and Anthony Joshua, which is an intriguing matchup. Hrgovic is a threat to any of the big names. But if the Anthony Joshua that we saw yesterday shows up again against Hrgovic, he'll stop Hrgovic. He'll stop him. Anthony Joshua looked that impressive to me as the Anthony Joshua of yesteryear that looked near flawless, that nobody was going to be able to challenge or beat him. I would pick Anthony Joshua to beat Hrgovic and stop him. Even though Hrgovic is a huge threat and I'd be at the edge of my seat watching that fight because he possesses that much power. He possesses the type of power that crosses through your guard. He punches through guards. That's how much power Hrgovic has. But as far as experience goes and knowledge, who else than the biggest name in heavyweight boxing for the last few years in Anthony Joshua? He performs well under the pressure and under the lights over and over and over again, where most of these other fighters haven't experienced that level. To be fair, yesterday was such a big type of an event where all of them experienced a little bit of that pressure under the lights and so forth. So if Hrgovic, I would like to see personally Daniel Dubois against Anthony Joshua. I feel Daniel Dubois has done enough and already challenged Usyk, where he came up short in his attempt. But I feel that he's done enough to deserve that fight against Anthony Joshua. And I think it'd be a good boxing match for both. It'd be a good, entertaining, solid matchup, Daniel Dubois and Anthony Joshua. But if they give Anthony Joshua Filip Hrgovic, and that does come to fruition, then let's get Andy Ruiz back active against Daniel Dubois. Or maybe King Kong Ortiz, because he was not part of this big event either. Daniel Dubois maybe against Ortiz or Andy Ruiz would be a perfect scenario for me, for Daniel Dubois' next outing. For Joe Joyce, who will be returning from back-to-back stoppage losses to Zhilei Zhang, Joe Joyce and Deontay Wilder, should Deontay decide to continue his career, that would be a perfect fight for both of them. Joyce against Wilder, two heavy-handed fighters, two heavy-handed hitters. Joyce with a little bit better boxing than Deontay, I think, but they're both slow now. They're both slow at their delivery. I think it'd be a super entertaining fight. Joyce against Wilder. If Joshua gets tied up with Hrgovic, then let's get Daniel Dubois with Andy Ruiz. Let's get Franck, Sanchez, and Kabayel against one another. Both of them stopped giants in their respective fights. Sanchez stopping Junior Fa, Kabayel stopping the so-called unstoppable force in Makhmudov. And if Daniel Dubois doesn't get Andy Ruiz, let's get Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker against one another. That's another great true boxing matchup. Just based on the fighters that competed here yesterday. If Joshua goes with Hrgovic, Joseph Parker Dubois would be great. Franck Sanchez and Kabayel would be fireworks. And then maybe Deontay Wilder and Joe Joyce coming off of losses, both of them. That would be a fun matchup, like a crossroads type matchup to see one of them's going to retire and one of them continues. And then Zhilei Zhang, well, maybe we could get him with King Kong Ortiz and two heavy-handed fighters and two really good pedigree boxers in Ortiz and Zhang. That would be a great fight. So, another long episode for you guys on this Christmas Eve. I wish you guys to have a Merry Christmas, a safe and happy holiday season. I wish nothing but health, nothing but love surrounding you. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for having continuously tune in and support this show and help me grow it as we're on the up and up. As we close out this 2023, I wish you all a happy and safe holiday season once again, and thank you. I'm Heck Cali. This is a Tomatolito Boxing Show. Merry Christmas to you and your loved ones.